I've been matchmaking all my life. I introduced my best friend and his wife. I introduced my program director, Kevin Drosch, to Inhala. And now I'm going to match you with Inhala. Yes, you two should sleep together. Skip the sleep center. Avoid the CPAP machine. Get in bed with Inhala. It's a custom-fit oral appliance. There's no bulky hoses or uncomfortable mask. Inhala works with your private medical insurance and makes the process seamless. I talked to the people at Inhala.com, and they're going to help you just like they helped out Kevin and his fiancée. She'll finally be able to sleep through the night while Kevin is using Inhala. Follow Kevin's sleep journey right here on 77 WABC. Now is the time for a treatment that is right for you. Visit Inhala.com or call 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA-1. So like my program director, Kevin, skip the sleep center, avoid the CPAP machine, get in bed with Inhala. Inhala.com, INHALA.com.
Okay, my first guest today is a longtime friend, Judy Shelton. You all know Judy Shelton from Fox News. You know her from the Wall Street Journal. She is one of the primary monetary experts in this country. She should be the next Federal Reserve chairman. I love Judy. And her latest book, Judy, you have two books out now. You have Good as Gold, and then you wrote, I guess earlier you wrote the book called Money Meltdown, but Good as Gold is the new book, right, Judy?
Yes, that's the new book, Steve. Thanks.
Well, congratulations on that. So let's just start with the big picture, okay? How do we make the dollar good as gold?
Well, I actually think that it requires more than just having a Federal Reserve chairman stand up at every press conference and
right.
say price stability is a responsibility of the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. What I'm suggesting in Good as Gold, in contrary to the idea people easily dismiss you, oh, you're a gold bug, not realistic, we can't go on the gold standard. What I'm saying as an entree to reevaluating the need for sound money, just as we're evaluating the need for sound finances and doing something about it in terms of the federal budget. We have 261 million ounces of gold that has been sitting there, owned by the Treasury, for 53 years. And
by the way, Judy, is that gold that's in Fort Knox? Where is it?
It's in Fort Knox. Some of it's in the basement of the New York Fed, but that is owned by the Treasury, and we carry it on the books of both the Fed and the U.S. Treasury as being worth $11 billion. Because when we quit putting a price on gold, trying to catch up with the old Bretton Woods system, which was set up at $35, and then Volcker said, we're just going to reform it. It's got to be higher than that. Because of inflation that we've had from overspending, we're going to have to make it worth $39 or $40 or $42. They finally gave up at $42, and ever since they've valued it at $42 an ounce. So now it's worth, say, $700 billion. I'm saying don't sell it. That's still the family jewels, but we have a family emergency. And let's have a 50-year U.S. Treasury bond. This would be so perfect. I'll call them Trump Treasury bonds. Have them issued on July 4th, 2026, that 250th anniversary of our founding, to mature in 50 years. Have them be backed. Use that gold as collateral and let them be redeemable in gold at the option of the bondholder. This becomes a barometer of how the Fed is doing on that promise to deliver stable prices. People will be able to compare the return on these Treasury trust bonds, I called them earlier, but they can be Trump Treasury bonds because it fits in with the new golden age. It's saying we are going to make the dollar as good as gold.
So, Judy, let me make sure I understand what you're saying, because this seems to make a lot of sense to me, but I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So I could buy under your plan, the Judy Shelton plan, I could buy a gold-backed Treasury security. Is that a good way to put it? And that so if the price of gold goes up, which means that the monetary system is too loose because we want gold to be stable in price, then I would get in my security, I would get the increase, the value of my security would rise as the price of gold rises. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes. What I'm saying is that's the easiest way to sort of imagine the general framework for it is, what would you rather have today, $2,700 or an ounce of gold? And you might say, well, I'm sort of indifferent. I mean, let's say that's
because that's the price that it's selling at now, right? 2,700.
Yes, but what would it be worth to you? How much would you pay for this U.S. Treasury bond, where 50 years from now you have the choice between $2,700, the face value at maturity, or the ounce of gold? And it's almost laughable, because people would say, well, of course, the gold is going to be worth a lot more than $2,700 because the Fed locks in inflation. That's even their goal, to devalue the dollar. And it's almost an exact comparison to the way a Treasury inflation-protected security works, a TIPS bond today, where people are saying, sure, I will make a loan to the government, but I don't want to lose purchasing power and sort of have been a dummy, I want to be reimbursed with a cost of living allowance to make up for the change in the CPI. Instead of the CPI, these are people saying, I want to be kept even and stable in terms of gold, which is kind of a surrogate for all commodities and even for the real economy.
Yes. So but you're not saying that if I bought one of these bonds that I'd be paid back. They wouldn't deliver gold bullion to my door. I would just get the increase in the value of the gold. Is that, in other words, I wouldn't actually take possession of gold, would I, under this?
You could. I think it should be literally the reason I would make the government. I'm amazed how many people say, well, first, I don't even believe we have it. I think the government's already blown it. So you do an audit and you warehouse this. You specifically use it as the collateral. The point being, if people literally wanted to turn in their bond and say, give me my ounce, you have it. They could do that. They could instantly say, I'll take it in cash. But what you don't want is to have the government be able to just pay you more money to match it. That's the problem. I think it has to truly be backed up literally in those gold holdings we have.
Now, this would also incentivize the Fed, the Federal Reserve Board, to stabilize the money, the money, because if they don't do it, then they're going to drive up the price of gold, which has happened, hugely since 1980. I mean, I remember when gold was $35 an ounce, and now it's $2,800 an ounce. So this would incentivize our monetary authority, called the Federal Reserve Board, to hold prices constant.
This shines a light on the recklessness of both fiscal and monetary policy. And I must admit, the idea goes back to 1981. Alan Greenspan had proposed this in a Wall Street Journal op-ed. President Reagan really liked it. He had said the first thing he was going to do is use some kind of gold backing for the dollar to make it the most trustworthy currency in the world. Right. It's combining those two ideas that what Greenspan said is this will shine a light on fiscal deficit spending, and this will be a way for the Fed to monitor its own performance in delivering sound money against what was traditionally the U.S. definition of sound money. So I think it's
Judy,
very valid in that sense.
Judy, I wanted to switch gears for a few minutes and go into this little spat that's been going on between Donald J. Trump, the president-elect, and Jerome Powell, who is the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And Trump is basically saying that he has the authority to fire Jerome Powell, or at least demote him from being chairman of the Federal Reserve Board and putting in someone in his place. And Jerome Powell is saying, sorry, Mr. President, you can't do that. I'm not leaving. And I don't know if the courts have ever really decided this. I might have to go up to the Supreme Court about whether the president has the authority to fire the Fed chairman. I believe the president should have. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me if the Fed chairman isn't responsible and responsive to the president, then who how do you get rid of the guy if he's doing a terrible job? And frankly, I don't think Jerome Powell's done such a good job. I mean, he's the one who let inflation go up to above 9%. Remember what happened in 2018, where he almost drove the economy into recession. So what do you think about this? Do you think the president should have or does have the authority to remove the Federal Reserve Board chairman?
Steve, I've seen arguments that get into the legalese of it for both sides. There is a clause apparently that says he could be fired for cause. Now, would you fire someone who pledges to deliver stable prices and end up with that more than 9% inflation?
Yeah.
I mean, that has imposed a real burden
it has.
on the American people. But I think what President Trump also said is, if I don't like what he's doing. Well, right now, if the Fed has changed its model, and instead of punishing the economy with restrictive interest rates, trying to suppress demand, if they've now changed after that bonus 50 basis point cut in September and followed up with another 25 basis point cut, maybe they truly have changed to wanting to recalibrate. And that could be closer to a supply side approach on the part of the Fed that would dovetail with the incoming Trump administration. Because now, if you're going to have lower taxes, less regulation, you're going to increase supply. And that's where I've always thought that's the way you fight inflation, not by curtailing demand. You try to increase supply. And, and if you have a lower cost of capital, now you're letting the private sector be empowered. That's how you expand investment in plant and equipment and hire people. It's not low unemployment and high growth that causes the inflation. That's a solution for high inflation. More supply.
Yeah, it seems like there are a lot of people at the Federal Reserve Bank that don't understand that. And by the way, there's a reason. I'm talking to Judy Shelton, by the way. Judy's new book is called Good as Gold. She's one of the premier thinkers on monetary policy. She's my choice to be the next Federal Reserve Board chairman, whether it's going to be soon or whether it's going to be in 18 months when Jerome Powell's term is up. But I've got to tell you, I'm looking at these numbers right now. I like to look at commodity prices. I know you do. They've been ticking up since we've had this 75 basis point reduction in interest rates. And Judy, my opinion is, and I'd like to get your opinion because yours matters more than mine does, but as I look at these numbers, I do not believe we have won the fight against inflation.
I do not believe we have won the fight against inflation, but we also have not put Doge to work.
Right.
A lot of the increase in prices is due to the demand pressures that are fueled by the deficit spending. So that's where we need to start. I mean, the Fed enabled all that, but the Fed then coerces banks not to let money get into the real economy by paying them this high interest rate. And all that does is give more power to government because they'll pay whatever rate they have to. But for real people in a real economy, access to capital is determined in large part by what it costs you to borrow. And so I don't think that when the Fed is pursuing restrictive rates to fight inflation, I think what they're really doing is just adding to the costs of doing business. Now people have to factor in a higher cost of borrowing. That goes to the bottom line. And at some point, it's fueling the inflation. So that's why we need to change the mindset.
We only got about 90 seconds left. I'm talking to Judy Shelton, who's the monetary authority par excellence. So I want to ask you one last question. I don't know if you saw this piece in the Wall Street Journal. I think it ran Thursday or Friday by a kind of prominent economist who writes frequently for the Journal. And this economist said that the tariffs would cause inflation. And then, Judy, that may or may not be the case, because tariffs are a tax. But then he said, but also extending the Trump tax cuts will cause inflation. So on the one hand, he's saying the tariff tax increase will cause inflation, but the reduction in income taxes will also cause inflation. My mind is spinning around. I don't understand the logic of this, Judy. So how do you feel about, A, will tariffs cause inflation, and B, will the Trump tax cuts cause inflation?
Here, it's funny. I don't mean to make it funny, but there's a solution in that. We import about $3.8 trillion worth of goods from our trade partners.
Sorry, what's
If
the
you
number
put-
again? What was it? 3 point?
3.8 trillion. It's about
A year.
8% of our total GDP.
So 3.8
If you
trillion a year.
Yes. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
And
Yes.
if you put a 20% tariff, let's just say, back of the envelope on that,
Yes.
it would generate, and everybody just paid that higher price, which is the static way that Democrats
Right.
analyze the impact of Trump policies. They say, oh, well, everyone will just pay the extra amount. I think, where did they get the money? What are they not buying now, since they're going to pay more for that? Put 20% on that, you just generated $760 billion to the federal budget, because that's who collects the tariff.
Yes.
All of these criticisms of the Trump tax cuts say, oh, well, here's what it will cost in terms of lost federal revenues. Well, the highest estimate put out by the Tax
Right.
Foundation put it around $600 billion. So you could cover it in one fell swoop.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're arguing, they can't argue that a tax cut over here causes inflation, but a tax increase over here causes inflation too. It has to be one or the other, Judy. And it seems to me people are talking out of both sides of their mouth on this, but that happens all the time. Judy Shelton, we are out of time. Thanks so much for joining. The book is as good as gold. And it is if you want to understand monetary policy, there's probably no better book than that. Judy, have a great rest of your weekend.